Welcome into the Wrestling Mat, everybody. I am Matt Camp, and this is a special episode of the Wrestling Mat. Thank you for being with us. Some of you might be getting this as bonus content. Some of you might be seeing it for the first time. Welcome in to the Wrestling Mat. You could subscribe. You can become a member if you're not already. Leave a comment. Turn the notifications on TheWrestlingMatShow.com. Join down there if you'd like to become a member. If you'd like to become a member, here's what we got for you. You might be knowing this already, but these are our levels of membership right above Todd, Matt Camper, the Matt event. Maybe you're getting this because it's a members-only video on first release. Maybe you're joining us for an AMA down the road. Maybe you haven't done this stuff yet and you want to. You can do it right there. Or you could do it at thewrestlingmatshow.com. You can go down below and just hit join, and then you find your way in, whatever you'd like to do. But I appreciate it if you're doing that. Appreciate all of you checking out this extra content here from the Wrestling Mat, which, by the way, is on at 1 o'clock, 1 Eastern, every single weekday. And there's more coming. We got an AMA coming up on August 26th for members. So become a member. You could be part of that. You may have noticed I'm willing to talk about anything. Quite honest about it, whether people like it or not. But I like to foster a very active, fun community, a positive community. A community that if they're not sure if they like something or they don't think something's working on a particularly wrestling show or storyline, we kind of figure out other ways to do it. Not, that stinks. Oh, you don't have anything else to offer? You should. Because that's what we all expect of each other here. Our great community, our great chat, our great members, our great subscribers here at thewrestlingmatshow.com. And please follow us and hit us up on social media. WrestlingMat23 on Instagram and Twitter. You get show announcements. You get some news. You get clips of the show. You can follow me and tweet me at the Matt Camp on Instagram and on Twitter. You might be learning about some new ways to take in the show. Perhaps in your ear somehow. I mean, you might be taking this in your ear now, but another way to take it in your ear, I'll just leave that out there for now. Let you kind of think about it. Get in a pod and just kind of think about it. Anyway, I like to tell stories of my career. And I've talked about this a little bit, and you see the name of the title. Let's go back a couple of years. Shall we? Shall we go back a couple of years? Shall we go back to 2022? 3 years into the company for me when this happened, just about 3 years. Heading into SummerSlam. SummerSlam, that's going to see a rematch between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. It was supposed to be done at that WrestleMania, greatest match of all time, title for title, ba 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 ba, every catchphrase and descriptor Vince could come up with. And then, depending on who you ask, the reason they went back to it is because Randy Orton was injured. And therefore, a series of matches and opponents that was supposed to be some kind of combination of Riddle, Randy, and Drew McIntyre changed up. There was supposed to be that show at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. They didn't sell enough tickets. So they moved it inside the MGM Grand, and Roman's like, I don't think I'm going to work that show. And he wrestled Riddle on SmackDown instead, in a great match. But it happened on SmackDown instead. And then we got to Brock and Roman again. And then, of course, Clash of the Castle with Drew McIntyre. But something happened. I was at Money in the Bank in Las Vegas that year. I did a bump episode there. I probably did something else. Theory loses to Bobby Lashley, wins Money in the Bank. Liv wins Money in the Bank. All that stuff. Vince was at that show. He was not at SummerSlam. Many times throughout my tenure there, before this time in the company, I'd have conversations with people who had been there for a while, people in digital, people who had been in television for 20, 25 years, that I felt comfortable talking with and who had been through all of the craziness of being in a company run by Vince McMahon. And I as a wrestling historian and knowing as much as I did about the business, and everyone basically from the 80s to 2022 grew up with Vince runs wrestling. Vince takes care of wrestling. That's what Vince does. But in July of 2022, right before that SummerSlam, something I had asked about many times to many people. What's the plan? What's the plan if Vince is done? Remember, that SummerSlam was in July, that year, end of July, which is important to the conversation. And I said, what's the plan? And I'm sure you've heard this, and I'm not speaking out of turn. He'll probably die doing this job. Okay. He's never going to quit. He's never going to retire. He's not going to give up the company. That interview he did with McAfee, where he crapped on his whole family. My then wife, my ex-wife. What? What are you talking about? Oh, that secret that is not really a secret, that thing? Allegedly. And everyone was like, I don't know. I said, who replaces him? I said, does that plan exist? Nope. And maybe it did. Maybe it did with a small group of people. Maybe those conversations had been had. But no one ever had the answer. And I had wondered that. I was like, am I going to be here when Vince is gone? I wondered that aloud many times. I asked people. That was an open conversation. Gone out of the company. And this is the year where the allegations and stuff had come out, and Wall Street Journal, and I guess it's still ongoing. But he kept showing up and putting himself on television. Got to stick together, and people would stupidly cheer for some reason. And that was gross. I hated talking about that stuff. I will tell you there was something in the scripts, because he had all different surgeries and was 70, whatever the hell years old. And there was something in the scripts, and it said, he would open a SmackDown or whatever the hell it was. Don't show Vince getting into the ring. How come? Somebody didn't want to be shown weak in any way. But he would do those promos, or, Stephanie did that one. It was just like, ugh. We don't have to band together for him. He's not my dad. He's not my grandfather. No. I am not being accused of that stuff. See ya. Thanks for the wrestling. I don't owe you anything. But then in July, right before SummerSlam, I was getting a haircut. I was paying. It was a Friday, so I would have been Thursday or a Friday. Was it Thursday? Either way, I would have been going to Stanford to do SmackDown Lowdown. And I get an email, on my work email, from Vince to the whole company, announcing his retirement. A very PR-y statement, best for the company, blah, 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 blah. And I went, oh my God, it actually happened. Holy shit, are you fucking kidding me? No, my friend who was cutting my hair, she's like, what happened? I'm like, Vince is done. She's like, wait, Vince? And I was like, yeah, he's done. It's over. She's like, wow, you need to go. And I was like, yes. And then, there was a talent meeting at SmackDown. I think it was Nick and Stephanie did it. And then, it's Triple H, who had been pushed the fuck out of power. Good God, was he out of the mix? I'll tell you more about that in a second. He's back. He gets talent relations. He gets creative control, all in one fell swoop. And I went, whoa! Now, little backstory on that. If you remember, the year prior, or I'll go back, I'll point to when 2.0 got going. It kind of happened at the same time when Hunter had his heart event, cardiac event, whatever it was. I think people know by now it wasn't very good, and he would end up retiring and putting his boots in the ring, but he was out. He was out of power. They took NXT and did what they wanted to do with it and made it 2.0. And people who never touched NXT before were getting involved with NXT. And okay, Sean, you're running it now. And Sean was a good soldier. Soldier. Sean was a good shoulder. Soldier? Shoulder. Soldier. I've never been able to say that word. Especially when you put Sean in front of it. A good company man. Soldier. That's what he was. So he ran NXT as he was asked to do by Vince, by Kevin Dunn, and by Bruce, and by John Laurinaitis. And they reassessed everything. What it was going to look like. The color splashes and all that stuff. And we're going to introduce all these new people. And, there was the idea of you're not staying in NXT anymore. You don't just get to hang here. Because people didn't want to go to Raw or SmackDown. People were happy there. They didn't want to fall into Vince's bad booking. And, man, it was bad during that time. But they were basically like, no, you're either going to help us at a higher level or you're out of here. And, people would exit. Kyle O'Reilly, Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano. And they all did business on the way out. Kyle did the stuff with Von Wagner. Nailed that one. I've told the story about Adam Cole. Go back and watch that in the archives at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. The reaction to him leaving and showing up in AEW. Shout out to Adam Cole. I hope you're doing well, buddy. Chugs, Austin. I'm with you, buddy. Gargano, they did that. They did that one more. Ciampa stayed around. He was kind of the guy. He was the champ and then hung in there and then Braun beat him and all that. But, he was the veteran of 2.0. And they did that War Games match and threw people in that had I think Tony D'Angelo had 8 matches under his belt. It's like, hey, dude, you're going to do War Games. That was booking malpractice and very dangerous to put a lot of people in those spots. What'd they do? B-Fab and Elektra Lopez in a street fight, the second show, and barely, B-Fab had barely done anything. Elektra Lopez was trained and trained well by, the same people who trained Deonna Purrazzo and Wendy Chu, Karen Q. But there was a lot of these people are not ready. I remember Carmelo and Trick coming out. And Carmelo had been part of 2.0. He wrestled Cole and he had wrestled Kushida and stuff like that. But I was like, who's this guy? Who's Trick Williams? And he got over right away. And you could see they were going with Braun, which has worked out. But Hunter was out of power. He was pushed out. And I remember, he did that retirement thing, which was a total PR thing with Stephen A. Smith. And, was announced. Put his boots in the ring at WrestleMania, and he came out there for Ciampa, Stand and Deliver, and all that stuff. But it was very ceremonial. And I remember after that WrestleMania in Dallas, because they used to do all staff meetings every couple of months. And it would be hey, here's what's going on in the company, and we're going to focus on marketing or this business side. And, you'd be surprised how many people that work in WWE have no clue of the day-to-day creative wrestling stuff. Because that, you got to remember, it's a massive company. And there's people that work in IT or finance or this. And it's their job is to do the job. It's not about that they work for a wrestling company. They happen to work for a wrestling company. They don't have to know the wrestling parts. And that was like my first day, and we're going to get into this on another episode, probably in the next couple of weeks, because it's going to coincide with when I started there 5 years ago. Like, my orientation happened with Mackenzie Mitchell. So we were getting hired at the same time. And then like an IT guy, someone in like, I don't know, like finance, like people who like, and they were like, hey, you should probably keep an eye on the product. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Of course you keep an eye on the product. And I was like, oh, wait, this is an overall orientation. And some of these people have nothing to do with the day-to-day wrestling of it. Okay, cool. But they would have these all-staff meetings. And, this is going on. You would get to ask questions. And some people, it would be Nick. It would be, Stephanie. It would be a variety of top heads, and you get some answers and you didn't get some answers. And then someone would get to host it every month, and people would be like, I want to host. Okay. It was all corporate rah-rah BS. Totally normal stuff. And I remember at the all-staff meeting, which I think was like the CFO, Stephanie, Hunter, Nick Khan, like all in a room, but different camera shots. And I say this because you got to think of where he was as a wrestler, where he was running NXT, how he worked as a producer and creative, where he is now. Hunter was reduced to taking a piece of paper and reading the records that were set for WrestleMania and all that stuff, which he does now at the press conferences, but he's far more involved. Like, that was like, hey, let's give him this to do. And you could see it. Like, he didn't have the same kind of life. And like, that dude grew up for the last 30, 40 years, 30 plus years in wrestling. His life has been wrestling nonstop. When he's been out injured, he's rehabbing to get back to wrestling. From being terrorizing to Jean-Paul Levesque to Triple, he's lived in wrestling. He is a wrestling lifer. He traveled with the Clique. He was part of the Clique. He married into the family. He became like, his whole life has been wrestling and talking about wrestling and caring about wrestling. And then this happens, and it's, we did this much money at the gate, and what a day. And like, that was it. And he was done because he had no other role. And I think they sent him to like one of the NIL things, just repping the company. And listen, I get he wasn't, the health scare was a health scare, but he had clearly been taken out of power for some reason. So fast forward a few months to July, and Vince retires. And we're all like, whoa. And you find out that Triple H has gained everything back and then some. And I will tell you, not necessarily because it was him, but because it wasn't Vince, who had been very hard to deal with creatively across the board. Plans changing, show days, matches going away. Matches that were on 4 drafts of Raw by draft 5. Nope, we're not doing that. And then we're going to change this, this, and this is moving here. And now you do have a match where that does not happen anymore. And nor should it. That's wild that stuff happened. And he was micromanaging. We got to change this and this. There was a belief of, hey, and there were people that were Vince loyalists and had been with Vince for a long time and defended him. And there are still people that defend him. And there are still people in that company that talk to him. I guarantee it. I don't think there's as many. But a lot of us and a lot of the wrestlers, and not all of them, because Vince had his people that got pushed. Okay. The eggshells are gone. We don't have to walk on them anymore. Let's see what happens. And I remember going to that SummerSlam, and I've talked about this a little bit. I think it was the first SummerSlam I attended as an employee of the company. We did a bump episode there, and I did the kickoff show and all that. And it was at Nissan Stadium in Nashville. They sold half the stadium. Wouldn't happen these days. And there was not that other pay-per-views have been bad to go to, but man, this one felt just like a good vibe. It wasn't tense. Stephanie's walking around talking to people. Obviously Hunter's taking over creative. And a lot of people, that was Vince's show. But yeah, he did. But Hunter started to get his hands into things. And there was that feeling and just talking to people. And there was a happiness. And there was a, hey, what's going to happen tonight? This feels like a new, fresh era. People were excited. Talent was excited. There were some people like, what's this going to be? How's this going to run? Is Hunter ready for this role? And I understood that too. But there was a positivity, an optimism. There wasn't the chaos. And there's always going to be chaos at wrestling shows, but that's built in a little bit. But it didn't feel like more was coming. I talked to a lot of people that night. You just felt pretty good. I go out and watch the first match from the crowd, which I like to do. I like to be out there when I could. Hard cam side, not trying to make myself known or seen or anything like that. And it was Becky and Bianca. And Bianca goes over Becky, and we wipe out the year before. And obviously Bianca had defeated Becky already at WrestleMania, but let's do it again. And okay. Becky's going to turn babyface. And Bayley's music hits, and she's back. Is that Io Sky's music? Io Shirai, whatever. Dakota Kai's back too. And and I know wrestling fans felt this watching it because I was on Twitter and we all went, oh shit, Vince didn't book this. Okay, here we go. Hunter's putting his fingerprints on this thing, and here's some people that a lot of us like. People who work there, employees. I went, okay. And I love Dakota. Charlie's the best. Days after that, we had her on the bump. She's like, listen. And I knew she was a heel, but there's just the natural likability, baby faceness to her. And she's like, yeah, I got called like right before it. Like this, she got let go on the same day as Stokely, which was a huge bummer, and it bummed a lot of people out. I remember hearing the stories of Gargano and Candice kind of changing how they thought their careers were going to go. That's what I heard. When that happened, I was like, whoa, Dakota and Malcolm Stoke? What? I remember getting those phone calls going. Triple H corrected some of those mistakes. So, that happened. And, not everything could be flipped over, but you could just kind of sense everything was less chaotic. And, obviously, I think the story with Brock had happened that Friday. He left and had to be talked back into coming there and showing up there. And he did. But I had heard that story too. He's gone. I'm done. Oh, okay. And they fixed it. And they have the match, and it exceeds expectations because they did the tractor, and we got Cowboy Brock and all that stuff. And, Riddle and Rollins, there was the thing with that, and they don't have the match in the show, and it gets pushed to Extreme Rules. And I remember Seth was pissed, and I heard that story, and he called someone in Talent Relations, John Cone or somebody, and it's like, hey, I want to talk to Paul. And, they had to figure that out. And there's that famous scene of Seth running down the aisle and everybody, Pierce and Hurricane running behind him when they had that big pull apart, there were things on the show that felt better. And there seemed to be that sense of it. And, that continued. That continued into Clash of the Castle. And we saw Solo come up. And, Dom turned on Ray and Edge. And he's in Judgment Day. And Judgment Day starts to find their footing. And, Damage Control, beats Asuka and Alexa and Bianca. And they didn't really win again for the next 4 or 5 months against Bianca. But they won that night. And Vinci was put back with Imperium. And that got a pop. It's like, all right. Wrongs are being righted. Mistakes are being fixed. You can feel booking is going to start to make more sense. And that continued. Obviously, Drew didn't win, but there was Solo. And, Roman and Paul are very much in control of what they do or did then. And Paul's fingerprints are all over that stuff. And there was a respect level. I do believe this, and I'm not saying he's perfect, and I'm not saying his booking is great. I think Hunter knew what people were coming out of. A dictatorship. And listen, I've heard the stories. Vince's perspective and how he acted and how he handled the company, I was told by so many people, changed when the company went public. Like he felt like he had to be in control and had to micromanage because now it's not just his money. Take that for what you will. And I think Hunter was more of, listen, let's talk to the talent. Let's talk to everybody. I have smart people that work around me. I have smart people that are working within the company. Yes, I'm taking on Vince's responsibilities, but not all of them. We have other people to do that. I think it cleared things up for Nick Khan a little bit, honestly. And I remember like Extreme Rules and the Wyatt stuff was starting, and the White Rabbit stuff and the music. And, we got a call before a bump. Hey, we want you guys to address it. We want Camp to address it. You don't say Bray Wyatt. You just acknowledge everything that's been going on and the little hints that have been dropped. And that was a cool responsibility for me to have. And, Rob Fee was a big part of that. And everything was done, with Bray's input and with Rob's input and, obviously Triple H. And there was a lot of buzz about it. People were excited and they knew it was Bray. We all knew it was Bray, but, that was the whole thing when I did those shows is you had to kind of find that gray area. And I got to address that stuff. And we talked about it on the show a little bit, but not too much. But enough to go, hey, this is all happening. We can't ignore it anymore. Because I think that happened too much with Vince. Obvious stuff would be happening. Or stuff we weren't supposed to see would get, it was part of the show. And the announcers had to completely ignore it. This was like, no. We know what we're doing with this. We're playing this music during the house shows. We're playing this stuff during the commercials. There is that buzz. There are these hints being dropped. There are these things that are messing with the show. What's going on? And I remember Extreme Rules in Philadelphia, getting to walk back into a building I watched so much great wrestling in. I watched 3 Royal Rumbles in that building. He Who Shall Not Be Named. Shinsuke and Asuka winning. And Roman winning. With The Rock helping him. Oh, boy, they hate this guy, huh? All that. And I walked back into that building. We did a bump episode. And it was Cormier. I remember Daniel Cormier. He was going to referee the fight pit with Riddle and Seth. And I talked to him. He was on the bump. And then I ended up having lunch with like him. And he's tight with Julius Creed. And Braun was there for some reason. I think they showed him in the crowd, which is good stuff. Hey, let's promote 10XT. And I think like Nikita Lyons was there, and they were showing, good, smart. Hey, it's a pay-per-view. It's on a Sunday or Saturday, whatever the hell it was at that time. Why not promote our other shows? Hey, there's Braun Breaker in the crowd. I remember sitting with them and talking and Drake, and I remember talking to Miz, and the people were excited. And the Wyatt stuff you knew was coming. It was like, when is it going to come? When's it going to happen? So you do the fight pit, and as soon as it's over, and Riddle wins, it didn't go anywhere. And here we go. And I'm happy it happened in Philadelphia. But I'm also happy it happened without Vince, because I think it would have gotten screwed up. And they showed the different characters or whatever it was. And then there was Bray. And that place was electric. Not about wrestling in the ring. Not about it promo. It was a rejuvenated fan base that got to see the guy that got talked down to and crushed at times by Vince come back and do what he wanted with the right support behind him. And that was a cool moment to be part of. And that's one of the biggest things I remember about post-Vince is stuff like that started to happen. And the shows had little things that happened, and there was not a lot of waste in motion. And yeah, Triple H had to get his way through some of the creative that was already kind of in motion. And that obviously would continue to last, and then we got to January, and that is another video for another time. But the first time Vince retired was a breath of fresh, needed air for someone who felt like he was sucking the oxygen away from everybody because he needed it for himself. And if he didn't have it, nothing else would work. But I will tell you, from my standpoint, there was definitely a feeling of, hey, we can be a little bit more lenient about the way we talk about wrestling. We started saying wrestling again. There was a thing that came out from Kevin Dunn. You know, hey, don't forget, we're still sports entertainment. All right. We backed off a little bit. But I remember Michael Cole calling Clash of the Castle and talking about EO and talking about Triple Tails and Stardom. And I was like, oh, the world has changed. You could argue that no one has benefited more from Vince being gone than Michael Cole. And I am glad that people are hearing and seeing how damn good he is and was always capable of being. But it's a lot better when some maniac's not in your ear questioning or yelling at you when you're trying to watch the show, call the show, work in your partners, talk to Kevin Dunn and whoever else in the truck, and then have Vince in your ear berating you, completely micromanaging you. No one has benefited more in wrestling from Vince retiring than Michael Cole. And now you're hearing it and seeing it on a regular basis and have been for the last 2 years. And him signing a new contract makes sense because he's probably a hell of a lot more rejuvenated. He told me himself how much Pat has meant to his career. But maybe that's the best thing. Maybe commentary is a hell of a lot better because the commentators who are damn good at their jobs on Raw and SmackDown get to do their jobs. And a lot of us got to do our jobs with a lot more free will and free spirit and excitement. And I don't think it's a mistake or a coincidence that even though there was a comeback of sorts, it didn't last all that long. And the company has thrived and only gotten bigger and better and stronger and more creatively positive. Ratings are up and attendance is up. It was time for him to go, and he went. I don't know what people want to think of Vince. I know there's people that feel like they owe it to Vince, and you hear comments and you hear interviews of, well, he did this for me and that for me. Okay. If you feel like you need to say those things, I get it. I don't agree with it, but I guess that's what people do. Depends how you view everything that's going on with him these days. There's more to these stories, and we'll get to them another time. But I want to thank you for joining me today for this very special episode of The Wrestling Mat. Please subscribe at thewrestlingmatshow.com. Become a member if you're not already. Get into our AMA on 8/26. We're going to be doing a special watch-along of a past wrestling event, and I hope you'll join us for that. Down below, hit the join button. Go to The Wrestling Mat Show up there. Sometimes I do this. This is a new thing. I'm holding it. Oh, look, there it is. Do that. Hit us up on social media. Follow us at WrestlingMat23. Hit me up at the Matt Camp. Send us your tweets, your thoughts, your comments. Leave a comment here. And as always, I'll be back to talk about wrestling even more. See you next time here on The Wrestling Mat.